Hello, welcome to the Eternal Possibility Hour. I am Esther Piszczek, and this is a interview show where I interview ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I am so pleased to introduce all of you to Molly Piszczek, and who is a portrait photographer. Welcome, Molly.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. I'm so glad that you're here to talk to me today. And I
I'm
just want
excited
to
to
say,
hear.
yeah, I'm just want to say up front that you are my husband's niece. Yes, that's how we know each other. So we've known each other for a long time, but I don't know a lot about your photography except for seeing it. So, how did you get interested in photography and start taking professional photos? Because right now you're in college, right?
Yeah, I'm going into my fourth year at Oregon State University.
Okay. And what are you studying?
My major is design and innovation management, something that a lot of people haven't heard of because it's not mainstream. It's a little bit on the newer side, but it's basically a major that combines business and design. So I have a lot of classes in creative spaces, but I'll still take those marketing classes, those economic classes, accounting, just to get that kind of holistic view of business. But it's kind of about managing designers and pushing creative projects forward while maybe not being the creative yourself. So it's
Mm.
kind of cool to be able to connect with other creative people who like design and are interested in those spaces, but still have that kind of business mindset.
So, is it designing spaces and like architecturally designing spaces, like workspaces, or is it more like magazine layout kind of thing?
I would say the latter more so. There aren't necessarily like a specific product design major at Oregon State, but there is apparel design and interior design. And people who are in my major might go into product design or be a part of layout design or user experience design, but they're not necessarily getting those technical skills with the major, more just kind of how do we incorporate design thinking into projects? How do we advocate for designers? But it is definitely more of that visual kind of interface or product design rather than industrial or like architectural.
So, tell me about photography.
Yeah. So I usually start this journey in like when I talk about it, that it started in 2016 when my mom, or maybe it was in 2012, but my mom had gotten a DSLR chunky camera with the nice interchangeable lenses to photograph my sister and me playing sports. And there was only so many opportunities to use that camera, of course. So then I would pick it up on the side and experiment, sometimes like turning it on myself and just taking pictures and being enamored with how you can get that professional blurry look in the background that you can't really get with just those little point and shoot cameras. But I also did have one of those growing up, and I love to make videos with my friends with that camera. So I've had a fascination with those kinds of um, creative projects, I'd say, for a long time. But um, when I did start using that nicer camera, I would take a lot of pictures of friends and family and would post them on my social media, my Instagram. And eventually, when I was a junior in high school, my old volleyball teammate who was about to be graduating, she needed some senior photos to print out and share with friends and family. And she'd seen my work that I just posted casually on Instagram and asked if I'd be open to doing her senior photos, which was something that was awesome, but also very intimidating because I'd never worked with like a paying client, regardless if I knew them or not. So I was definitely a little bit lost as far as pricing and posing goes, but it was still an exciting endeavor. And after that is when I started to realize that I really want to do this more often for money and kind of creating that experience for people. So yeah, it kind of just took off in my junior year of high school.
Oh, that's great. So when you're talking about the experience, can you tell me a little bit about more about that?
Yeah. So I feel like a common misconception with photographers is that they have their fancy camera and they click a button and then they charge a bunch of money. But that's not really the case when you're photographing just everyday people who've never been in front of a camera before. Because even I, you put me in front of a camera and I'm like, what do I do with my hands? What do I do with my body? I know this is a shared experience with a lot of people. So you really want to get people comfortable, and that just doesn't happen with like the snap of your fingers. You have to um, build a relationship with them over the short period of time that you have with them and make them comfortable and excited to be there and excited to see the pictures and happy with the pictures, because they'll have those for a long time, like forever. And they might print those out or send those to people, use them as profile photos. And you really want to give them something that they're happy with. Um, yeah, hope I answered the question.
Yeah. So I was looking on your website and preparing for this interview, and I saw that you said that your processes, you have a designated location, you agree to what the date and the time, and then you get there, and then you want to use all of your time really for taking pictures, and that you kind of get to know the client while you're taking the pictures. And so, how do you form that relationship to get them to really relax and have a little persona come through for the camera? Um,
Yeah.
when you're just meeting them and getting out of the car and saying, "Okay, pose this way. I'm going to start snapping."
Yeah. Well, I do think that you kind of need to have a personality that is excited to meet new people. Um, because I've heard some people um, who are interested in photography, they also don't know how to go about these interactions. Um, and part of it is not being the most extroverted person or willing to make those new connections. So right from the get-go, I'm super excited to see an inquiry come in through my email and seeing that somebody is a high school senior who's graduating in the spring. And I immediately like try to get information about what they're looking for, what their hopes are for the photo shoot, right after they fill out that form. And I respond in an email. And honestly, I would like to get better at getting to know them ahead of time. I know some photographers have a long list of questions they go through with their clients, to like learn about their hobbies or their goals, just to have starting points for conversation when the session starts. But for me, I just, like you said, do that over time. So just to give you an example, I'll park somewhere. I'll be waiting outside the camera with my car when we're on location. And sometimes I do know what the person looks like ahead of time, and sometimes I don't. So I usually will text them if we can't find each other. But when we connect, I say, "Hey, like, so excited to meet you. Are you excited to get your photos taken today?" Um, it definitely depends on every interaction, but I'd say keeping it upbeat and assuring them that I'm going to tell them what they're going to do the whole time. So they have nothing to worry about. They don't have to have practiced anything ahead of time. That's what my job is for. That's just kind of how I establish how the shoot is going to go. And then as we go, I will often ask about how their summer has been, or if there's an upcoming break period, what are you planning on doing in this break? And those are usually good opportunities to just get a conversation going. I'm going to interrupt myself one more time, and say that I've fallen into the trap sometimes of talking too much about myself. And then I think that kind of makes it a little awkward for them because then they have to ask me questions. But I've been really trying to shift to asking them questions and making it less about me, even if it was unintentional, just so that they can kind of get excited about what they're talking about and then feel like I'm a friend rather than someone who's doing a service for them.
Yeah. I think in general, people really love talking about themselves. I think it's rare where you'll find someone who doesn't want to answer questions about themselves. So I think it's a really great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I genuinely am really interested in people. Sometimes my mind will just kind of flutter and I'll just be like, oh, this is like something I did. I want to
Yeah.
share it with you. But then the time runs out and I feel like I didn't learn enough about them. So
Well, I
that's
think that's
important.
helpful though, but that is helpful because then they feel that you're relatable, that you have some experience that's similar to theirs. And then it makes them feel, I think it makes them feel safer and calmer with the entire interaction and what you're doing.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely the balance and trying to figure that out as you go.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's why you photograph a lot of people, right? You get new experiences every time, different personalities, different things come up.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like I've learned that some people respond to my humor a lot differently than other people. I'll try to make jokes or make fun of myself, but sometimes we'll get a genuine laugh, and then sometimes we'll just get an uncomfortable smirk.
Oh no.
Um, so you kind of have to learn what their sense of humor is over time, also, which is can
Yeah.
be tricky. But as long as you make them feel comfortable, that's the first step.
Yeah. So you have different packages on your website and I'm going to link that below so people will be able to find you, especially if in the Portland area in Oregon. But you have different packages with different time availability for you. And of course, more pictures, more time, more pictures, more outfits, more locations kind of thing. But when you're doing those, the shortest possible one that you have, do you feel any time pressure or do you kind of have it down now where you know what's going on and how it's going to go?
Yeah, I always tell my clients that if we go over a little bit, I'm not going to charge them more. So that's just on me. Like, I am in charge of making sure we're on track. So honestly, it does pretty much go over the time, every time. And I'm kind of okay with that. I expect that ahead of time. And if anything, it makes someone feel like you're giving them a bonus. So that will kind of help the experience, I think, a little bit. But doing this for so long already, I've photographed over 100 clients. Um, you've you kind of get a feel for what kinds of poses that you'll need to get ahead of time. Maybe we'll do some like simple standing ones to start, and then there's a spot to do some sitting. So I'll do a couple close up sitting and then far away sitting, and then oh, let's energize the session a little bit. Let's do some walking photos and have them walk up and down. And then let's go back over here and do this pose. So I kind of have a general mental idea going into the session of the types of poses that I'll need to get. Because a big thing with me is variety. I want people to be satisfied with what they paid for and feel like they have options regardless of the package they choose. So it never fits in that specific time frame, but depending on what the location is like, and how many outfits I have, it can fluctuate. And I feel like I've been able to have a nice mental list of what I need to accomplish, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of an outline in your head about
Yeah.
how it's going to go. So you were talking about senior portraits. I know you do a lot of those, but you also do a lot of other things. You can tell us about the other types of portrait photography that you do.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, there are many different photography seasons. So the senior photos do come mostly late summer, early fall, because there are yearbook deadlines that people have to submit a photo for their high school yearbook by. Those can be in late October all the way to early February, depends on the school. But often people don't really realize that, and then they have to rush to get their photos done. So photographers kind of prepare for that influx of inquiries in the late summer. Um, but then in the wintertime, no one really wants to get senior photos taken, nor do they in the springtime because they're either just about to graduate or they're finishing up their junior year of high school. So that's just not on people's minds. Um, so then the other specific season is usually grad photos for college graduates, and that will be in the springtime because there aren't necessarily yearbook deadlines, but they do want to send out pictures, grad announcements to their loved ones, and then post about graduating on social media. And then I haven't dove in, I haven't dived too far into the wedding industry yet, but I've heard that like the kind of late summertime into fall is pretty busy for weddings as well. And then couples photos happen year round. People are getting engaged or just want some nice photos or want maternity photos.
Mm.
That can kind of fluctuate. So the deadest season is usually winter, but that's kind of the time when you can go into a studio where there's some warmth and do some work against backdrops, kind of explore creative opportunities a little bit more. And then also family photos is something that I've started getting away from just because I've realized the posing of families and trying to interact in those situations isn't something I super enjoy. But people want family photos for their Christmas cards or New Year's. So late fall is popular for that too.
You also do some commercial work.
I have kind of taken those opportunities as they've come. Um, a small legging company reached out to me and asked me to do some commercial shots for them, and plans kind of shifted a little bit after we had done some studio work just for the what's it called? The catalog shots for their website. We were planning on doing some more lifestyle types of shots with models in the leggings out in nature, interacting and just getting some of those cool photos to connect you to the brand a little bit. But things kind of fell through on their end with their scheduling and planning. So we didn't get to finish up that project. And then I've had some family members with businesses who have asked me to do headshots and photograph some spaces for their businesses. But I've found that I really enjoy the more creative projects or getting to work one-on-one with people, like in the senior photo situation.
Right. And in creative projects, are you talking about portraits versus places? Like
Yeah,
photographing, like an office space and trying to make that look trendy and cool.
yeah, you can definitely get creative with photography wherever you go. I've always been more drawn to portraiture. I'm taking photos of people just because it's more dynamic and you can kind of play off of who the person is and what they're like, as opposed to just trying to come up with a solution for a static environment. Um, so when I say creative sessions or creative shoots, I'm kind of talking about doing a portrait session with unique poses, something that you might see like on the cover of a magazine, something kind of fun, quirky, bright colors, or maybe a moody vibe, poses from different angles, maybe like shooting from down here, from above, or using different types of lenses to create different looks. I don't really advertise that too much because most people don't want to pay for that kind of experimental session. I don't really need photos like that, but that's something I like to do with friends or people I network with through like photography workshops, just to express that more creative and um, play um, magazine photographer for a day.
Well, that's really fun. And I think the more you experiment with that, the more likely it is that someone's going to come into your world and say, hey, I want to pay you to do this for me.
Yeah, that's actually how the legging company decided to approach me, is because they saw some of the studio I studio work I did with like athletic clothing, and they were like, wow, I really like this. Can you do this for us? So that, yeah, that's a perfect example of how work that you do for fun could translate into real business opportunities.
Well, it sounds like that's how you really got started being a professional photographer in the first place, because you were just casually posting, the pictures you were already taking, and then people said, "Hey, I want to pay you to do this." And that's really fabulous.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot from the photography community that you need to present the work that you want to do. You shouldn't be posting family photos if you want to be a magazine, or like editorial is the term that we use, editorial photographer, because like we're saying, no one's going to notice your potential for the editorial work if you're just doing posed family photos. So even if it doesn't provide you with money, still go out and take those photos and share them if you want to get more work like that.
Yeah. So, do you have an idea or a dream goal for where you'd like to be, or what type of more advanced work you'd like to be doing?
Well, just to be honest, I am planning on not doing photography full time for now. Right now, as I am a student, this is kind of a part-time thing that I've been building for a long time. I've invested money into, but I am not at the point where I want to rely on it full time. But as I continue to do this, I would love to get more commercial work, in terms of those creative types of sessions where you get to show off a product or a clothing line, but in nature, and people doing activities, and having kind of a uh, creative opportunities, um, instead of being told XYZ, this is how it has to look.
Mhm.
So I'd love to get to a point where I'm established enough where people can trust me with my vision, and kind of bring those branded projects to life. I've also started to do some weddings, which is something that I hadn't really considered until this past year. And weddings are a completely different thing than these posed senior sessions, because not only is it a full day, it's a combination of photographing people in their environment in an event setting, while also making sure you get those pose shots, and trying to direct large groups of people, trying to direct just individual people, um, be kind of a fly on the wall, but also speak up when it's appropriate. So I've done one of those so far, and I have a couple coming up this year, and I'm excited to explore that more because I know it's a big industry and that there's a lot of opportunities out there, but I'm just not completely sure that it's for me yet. I have to explore a little bit more.
Yeah, I think weddings seem like a combination of the creative work that you like to do, where you're getting those spontaneous photos, spontaneous expressions on people's faces, but then also the family posed work, which you've told me that you're not all that excited about, but that is also a part of, wedding photography.
Yeah, it's very holistic. There's a lot of things going on throughout the day. You have to definitely have to make sure you have a list of what you'll have to do ahead of time.
Yeah. So you have also worked with models, right?
Yeah.
So those are people who professionally get their photo taken all the time. And so what's the difference for you working with a model versus just, you know, uh, a high school senior who's getting their senior grad pics done?
Yeah, I definitely love both. Um, I love working with someone who has no idea what they're doing, and I can help them, make them feel more confident, give them a toolbox for getting photos taken of themselves in the future. But I also love having the abilities to be more creative because someone doesn't need that direction. They kind of understand what the final product could look like, and they'll use their body and their perspective to try to bring those projects to life. So I wouldn't say I prefer one over the other, but it's a little bit less work to work with a model because there's a lot of things that you don't have to go through with them that they just know right off the bat. Um, they'll just start moving their body once they hear the camera click. They'll change positions, and as a photographer, you still make suggestions or you have a vision and you tell them like what you want them to do, and that's totally normal. But you don't have to worry about that constantly.
So when the people, and I suppose this might happen with models as well, I noticed on your website that you're really about getting the person's personality and their natural self to come out and be seen in the photos. And so what do you do about that whole, like pasted on plastic smile that some people will pass off as their real selves? Are you able to pretty easily just like figure that out if that's what they're doing and then find some way to get them to relax and do something different?
Are you talking about models?
Well, I don't know much about models. I would think models sometimes do that as well. If they're just like tired or not really into it, they'll just like go into, pretend mode. I think it probably more likely though happens with people who are just really nervous. Like, all right, like she wants me to smile, I'm gonna smile, but I'm not really into it.
I don't think that I'm a person to call something out if I see it. I'm very honest. I don't like beating around the bush in general. So in those situations, if someone is just kind of like smiling through the pain of getting their photo taken, then I'll be like, okay, now pretend that you're not having the worst time right now. To be here, and usually like kind of recognition of the obvious makes people laugh. Sometimes I'll tell people to fake laugh, and that will make them actually laugh because they feel embarrassed fake laughing. And sometimes that's just what you have to do. And sometimes I'll tell them to be super serious. Do not smile. Don't smile at all. I'll be pointing a camera right in their face. Okay, hold it, hold it. And being serious is also something that's outside of people's comfort zones. So that will bring out a genuine smile most of the time too.
Yeah. Tell me about the back end.
Like after the session happens or before, I guess also. So yeah, I'll just briefly tell you what the process is and get into it. But after the session is over, they'll pay the remaining amount online. I have them pay a deposit fee to secure the date, and then the final after the session is done and before I can deliver back any photos. And then what I've been liking to do over this last year is deliver about 5 sneak peeks the day after because people can't wait to get their photos, and I totally get that. And it kind of makes them more excited to see the full gallery after because it's right fresh in their mind and they know what to expect a little bit more. So I'll come home after the session and upload the photos from the little card. Um, this is like the SD card. Then I put it in this bad boy so that I can put it into my laptop. And then I have a hard drive, an external hard drive. I think this is 4 TB, tons of storage. And I plug both of those in at the same time, and I move the photos directly from the card, from the camera, onto this hard drive, because otherwise these large files will just take up way too much space on the laptop and cause everything to slow down. Something I learned from following different photographers on Instagram. Learned a lot from different photographers on Instagram. And then I'll take the photos from the hard drive and put them into Adobe Lightroom, which is an editing software specifically for photos. Some photographers like to use Photoshop as their main editing software, but I only use Photoshop if they're necessary. Adjustments like something in the background that's just way too distracting, I want to try to cut out and fix. But usually it's just Adobe Lightroom. And my turnaround time for the photos is 2 weeks. So within those 2 weeks, I will make lighting, color, and tone adjustments and make sure everything looks natural and within my typical style. And then I will retouch for acne because although I think that, beauty is so expansive, and you really don't need to be worried about that acne. If people are going to be paying hundreds of dollars for professional photos that will last them a while, then they shouldn't have to remember the pimple that they got the day before the session. So I'll retouch for acne or just like little blemishes that they want to be removed. But I don't do anything like body or face changing. That's just not my style. It goes against my values. So I'll just do the light retouching. And then I'll usually get it down to about that amount of photos specified in their package and go through and pick out some photos I would like to see in black and white. So I can provide them with some black and white versions too, because I think that's always fun too. And I'll upload to a program called PicTime, which is great for delivering galleries to clients. It just formats the photos in a really nice way, and it's specifically for the gallery deliveries. People can order prints off of that website, so it's just perfect for me. And then gallery doesn't expire, and send them a thank you as I send them the gallery, just showing my gratitude for them working with me. And then I'll send a follow-up email a week or two later, kind of asking if they'd be interested in providing a testimonial, because that kind of those kinds of comments really help for new clients in the future, because they can get a firsthand view on what a previous client wanted to share about their experience with me. So yeah.
Do you find it difficult to pick the number of photos, or they're just like easily weed out the ones that are like not quite in focus, or they're blinking or red eye or whatever?
When I started taking photos, when I started this portrait photography, I took way too many photos, and then now I only take way too many photos. So usually for a basic session, that one has a total of 40 edited images. When I deliver the photos back, I'll end up taking around like 300 to 400 photos during the session, and then I'll go through maybe like 3 times and flag all the ones that I don't like, that are just obvious. Their body looks kind of awkward, like their positioning, or their expression isn't like natural, or they're blinking a little bit. So there'll be just obvious ones to get rid of. And that will usually bring it down 30% or 50%. And then I just have to do that process a couple more times after I've seen all of them. I know what we're working with, um, to really bring out those most authentic expressions, that they look like their best self, and that give them some variety. Sometimes it is very challenging. And sometimes I'll send them a lot more than I promised because I can't decide.
Yeah. So how would you describe your style?
Yeah, I would say it is, like, editing wise, I actually have some slides in the presentation for this.
Would you like to
Um,
share?
yes. See. Do you want me to go through the whole presentation, or should I go directly to those slides?
No, let's go through the whole presentation.
Okay,
Let's do the thing.
cool. Because why would we talk about photography without having some visuals to go along?
Definitely need pictures to talk about photography.
Yeah. All right. You can see my screen, I'm
I
assuming.
can.
Perfect. So yeah, this is a photo of me taken recently. This is my logo, and these are some different sessions I've done in the past. And my overall style I would describe as natural and genuine, because a tagline that I had on my website for a while was, "Why get photos to look like anyone but yourself?" I might still have that written somewhere, but that's what I believe is, why would you pay for something to not look anything like yourself, um, and the best version of yourself. So as far as posing goes, that's partially posed to kind of give those static images of people looking at the camera, that they can use in a variety of contexts. part prompted where I'll say, okay, now pretend like you are, what I like to do is like stand here and then I want you to pretend like someone's calling your name in the background. So pretend they're like Esther, and then you're like what? Like who's saying my name? And that will kind of give a specific type of expression that is kind of hard to manufacture. Or I want you to make big figure eights just in this field, and you can just pretend like I'm not even here, and you're just on a perfect day having a picnic, and it depends on the setting, but partially prompted, and that ends up giving a lot of variety, like I mentioned. So this is just some of my work with high school seniors and college graduates. I making this presentation, there were way too many photos that I wanted to include, but you just get a little snapshot. Gotten to work in big sunflower fields and on high school campuses. I recently did one in a bookstore, which I thought was really cool because this client loved to read and she really wanted senior photos that captured that. Downtown Portland on the waterfront, places with expansive views. It's been awesome. Some of my work with couples. The Columbia River Gorge has been a very popular spot, and I love going there. Recently, I got to do my cousin's photos in Utah, which is awesome for me. I love going to the coast, rolling around in fields. And you can see that some of these look a little bit more posed, like the ring shot, but some of them look a little bit more natural because they were accompanied by prompts. So people can let loose and just do a thing and let me capture them doing the thing. And then when we talk about those like editorial types of shots, you can see some of that here. Like with the frames, that was just a prop that I had at my house. And those two people in the photo were people I've kind of worked with a few times. Nevaeh is the gal, and we played volleyball together a long time ago. And then she had the connection to Cly, the guy in the photo, who also likes to model. And we just got creative with it. We went to a field and just tried a bunch of different things, and it was really fun. And then I've also taken some behind the scenes photos on a music video set. In the lower right corner, you can just see me taking a photo of the videographer at work, which was fun to be a part of. And then people dancing at a wedding, a group of bridesmaids at their bachelorette party, just hanging out on the coast. So it's just really fun to work with so many different people and try so many different things. So then going back to like my style a little bit, I put together this slide to explain briefly the differences between different lenses that people can choose for their camera bodies, because I think that has a lot to do with what a person's style looks like. So this is a session that I did with my friend Chance, who's a videographer, and he needed some branding photos. So we went to Portland, in a parking garage and had fun with it. I have two main lenses. One of them goes from 24 millimeters to 70 millimeters. And I don't know if I can really get into the specifics just with my own knowledge, but 24 millimeters has a wider depth of field. So it's more of a fisheye effect, whereas 70 millimeters is more zoomed in. And a big indicator of the difference between these is the buildings in the background. So I was standing in a relatively similar place for all of these photos. And although Chance is about the same height in all the photos, the buildings look a lot different. So like I'll have to go closer to the subject with a 24 millimeter in order to get him the same size in the frame, or a lot farther away for like the 70 millimeter. And I've heard that the human eye is most comparable to the 35 millimeter, and that's my go-to. So all of the pictures that you've seen so far have been taken with the 35 millimeter lens. just because that feels the most natural to me. 24 millimeters is pretty stylistic. It's a cool look, but I don't think that most clients want to pay for that kind of look. And then 70 millimeter or 85 millimeter, anything going up that way is definitely a professional look, but it reminds me too much of the animals that you photograph on a safari, where it just looks a little bit too flat and fake. Honestly, I prefer the 35 millimeter look. Plus, it allows you to get closer to your subject and be a little bit more engaged.
Yeah, thank you so much for that explanation. Because just looking at these just myself without having really any knowledge, I might say like, all right, well, what's really so different about these? Except I can tell it's like closer, further away. But that was really helpful, and to see the different comparisons to the building, to the person, and
Yeah, for anyone who has like an iPhone, I don't know if all phones do this nowadays, but if you do the 0.5x zoom on your camera, then that will be similar to the 24, where it's like that fisheye. But if you kind of stand farther away and zoom in, then you'll get closer to the 70 millimeter look. So you can kind of accomplish these different looks with your phone.
yeah, that's a great
And
tip.
then, yeah. And then here's, oh, I was gonna say, yeah, 35 is my go-to. This is another example from the wedding I shot in April. These are pretty much the same pose, but the 35 millimeter looks a lot different than the 85 millimeter that I was using here. Just kind of the background and the people in the 35 in this situation look a little bit more distorted than they do in the 85. So in this specific instance, for these post portraits, I preferred the 85 millimeter. It just looked a little bit higher quality, whereas the 35 made them look just a little distorted. So as a photographer, you kind of have to have your options and know when to use them. And knowing when to use them is just based on your preference. There aren't really any rules. It's just what do you think looks the best and what do you want to deliver to your client. And then here's just a quick visual of if that helps some people, where 75 millimeters or 17 millimeters is like a wide type of lens, whereas 200, you get really focused. You have to stand farther away from your subject. But it's a very shallow depth of field, meaning that it's a very blurry background and really can focus on your subject. So that's kind of my lens preference to bring the style I want to life. As far as editing goes, going back to that, I put together some before and afters so you can see what images look like directly out of my camera versus how they'll look when I deliver them back to a client. So you can see that there are like obvious adjustments to the background brightness in that first set. You can see the mountains a little bit more in the background, and the lighting is a little bit more even throughout the image. But in the after version, the subject looks a little bit more blue and a little bit more rich, which is kind of consistent with a lot of my editing. If you just see that photo on its own, it doesn't really have a blue look to it, but when you compare it to the before, you can definitely tell that there's like a little bit of a hint of that. Same with the before and after on the next set, there's like that green, which isn't a rule with photography, but it's just something that I've incorporated into my editing to create the look I want. I don't know if I can really explain that, but
No, I think these are really good examples. I think it's really easy to see between the before and after about what has changed in the picture and the tone of the skin in both of them, and even the tone of the background. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
yeah.
Are
And you
you,
can also,
oh,
sorry.
sorry. Are you using any light, like they use the umbrellas and the lights? Are you using any of that while you're taking pictures, or are you just using natural lighting?
That's a really good question. I I rarely ever use anything besides just my camera. I've found that when you use those big white like reflectors that you hold that bounce the light off of the reflector and onto the subject's face, it just looks a little bit manufactured and not as natural as I'd like it to. Um, Even when the sun is lower in the sky, usually if you're using a high enough quality camera, then you can edit it after the fact to like preserve those details in someone's face and increase those shadows. But yeah, all of this has been done without one of those reflectors or without an umbrella, just me and my camera. Thank you for asking that
Yeah, I
because
love that.
yeah, you
I
definitely
see
see
we have a
that kind of
rose
thing.
garden here and people are always taking grad photos and they have all like somebody carrying around not always, but someone carrying around the umbrella and the light and the whole thing. So I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, those will definitely turn out a lot different than how mine tend to. And sometimes those little things can help, um, just even in situations like mine, but personally I don't use them. And here's just another quick example. You'll see that both of these photos were backlit a little bit, meaning that the sun was coming from behind, whereas these are two different lighting situations. The first set is on an overcast, cloudy day, which creates a really natural diffusion of light. So you have to think even less about the lighting that you're in, because pretty much any angle that you shoot from, you'll be able to edit the photo nicely. But then the second set is more of a direct light, a harsher light, and the before and after is a lot more drastic just because I was trying to make it a little stylistic, like make it a little bit creative, but I still want to not make her look too white compared to like the shadows in the image. So you kind of have to balance those, the brightness and the darkness in the photo, the highlights and the lowlights. But yeah, so every session is definitely different, but I generally prefer to have overcast days, or if it's a sunny day, then have the backlighting that you saw right here because it has that kind of warm glow. And then direct lighting, the harsh direct lighting, is often for more creative looks because it is a little bit more intense.
So do you plan that out for the time of day? I mean,
I
the
do.
weather makes a big difference and it might not be the weather that you want on the day that you set for the shoot. Have you had to like reschedule things because of that?
Yeah, depending on how busy the season is, um, I'll be straightforward either way with my clients when they inquire. If they say that they really want those like sunny photos, those golden hour photos, if I know it's a busy season, then I might say, we'll hope for that, but we might have to, it might end up being overcast. But I can still make them look bright because that's how I always make them look rich and bright. Um, but if it's a little bit of a less busy time of year, then I'll say, yeah, like we can totally make that work. And then I'll be more flexible with my schedule. So we can reschedule. If the day is going to be overcast, then we can look for another day that has more sun forecasted. And pretty much always, regardless of time of year, I will refer to this one site that tells you the sunset times for different locations and dates to plan these sessions, and depends on the length of their package, but like anywhere from 2 hours to 1 hour before sunset is when I often like to start in order to get the sun like low enough in the sky so that we can get that nice backlighting without it being directly overhead and shooting right from the top of their head and making weird shadows on their face. So anywhere where there's like the sun is low enough where I can kind of get it from behind is my sweet spot. And I think that's pretty consistent across the industry as well.
Great. Do you have more slides?
Yes. Sorry, I'm talking so much. I just want to
No,
make sure
no,
I
that's okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure. And if you didn't, I wanted to come back full screen.
actually that's my last slide. Perfect. Yeah, I just listed my Instagram and my website, but I know that those will be linked separately too.
Okay, so thank you for that. That was super helpful. It's always nice to have visuals to go with the tech part of photography. So on your website, I've really loved, you've got some really beautiful galleries, and I encourage anybody watching this, even if you're not in the Portland area, and you will never ask Molly to take your pictures. Her pictures are so fun to look at, especially the editorial shots with the different models and more commercial type work, like the people with the frames in the fields. They're just really, really cool, really well done. But you put your own self-portraits in there, which I loved every time I came across one. They're just so fun and so you. And how do you, like, what made you do that? And how do you figure out what pose? Have you taken, 300 pictures of yourself and then pick the one that you like the best? Or what's your kind of way of going about that?
I'm really glad that you asked that, because self-portraiture is much different than taking a photo of someone else. You don't really realize how hard it is to be in front of the camera until you put yourself in that situation. So that's one reason to do it is to remind yourself of what your clients might feel, so that you bring yourself back to reality when you conduct sessions and you can kind of see from their perspective and not try to force too many things on them if that's weird in front of a camera. But like I said, I follow tons of photographers on social media to learn new things and get inspiration and to show support. But um, I think that was what influenced me to try out self-portraiture is just seeing these other photographers do it. One of my favorites and one of the big people in the industry is named Marina Williams. She's big into self-portraits and doing creative things with those. Um, and she has really hello.
Nisha usually makes an appearance.
Um, she has really prioritized the education aspect of photography, so she has a lot to share. And there are some technical differences, because you have to make sure that you're in focus and line up with the camera in a certain way. And depending on your camera's abilities, you might be able to sync it with your phone and use an app to focus or change settings, or you might have to put a stool in the place of where you're going to be, manually fix the focus over here, and then do the timer, and then go over here and try to pose. But I would say that self-portraits always take way longer than you wish that they would, because you can't see the photo right away, and you just have to do a lot of trial and error. So it's a lot of fun to experiment with yourself and not have to rely on someone else as a model, but it can be challenging for sure.
Yeah. Did you take a lot of photos to get the ones that you have on your site?
Yes, a lot. The ones I put in here, this last one, and then from the presentation and the first one, I had a friend who's also a photographer take those, but some of them that are on my website, had to take hundreds of photos to sift through and find a couple that were in focus and I was presenting myself in the way I was expecting or that I had in my mind. Um, and yeah, it's always trial and error with self-portraits.
Yeah, they're really fun. They're really fun. So, what would you ask or tell someone who just wants to start out on their own? They're super inspired by hearing you talk about photography and they already like taking pictures. What would you tell them to do?
Just like with anything, practice is extremely important and experimentation, because you might have visions on what would be cool, but you might not know how to bring those to life. And you really just learn that over time, whether it be how you pose someone or what your editing technique is. That all develops way over time. So anything that you've seen here, like this isn't how it looked when I first started out. It's a big process and you have to try new things and see what you like and what you don't like. And a big part of this is following people and their journeys on the internet, on social media, or connecting with people in your community. If there are photographer groups on Facebook, that's a great place to start, just to have those conversations with people who have a shared interest. And networking has helped me a lot, just build friends in this industry and connect with models. I'd say nowadays I'm able to be a little bit more selective in the type of work I take on. But when I first started, I was saying yes to everything, and I'm glad I did because I was able to get those experiences and realize the things that I don't really enjoy that much. Um, so a lot of practice, a lot of experimentation, and connecting with people, even in um, unusual situations. This is a great place to start.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I had asked you, I sent you some questions before this, and I had asked you kind of a funny question, which is, who would you love to photograph, have a photo shoot session with, living or dead, any person in the whole universe? And what would be your answer?
Yeah, I pondered this for a while, and I think for me, it's kind of like what you do with Internal Possibility Hour is you get to kind of capture people in their element, in a sense. And I really like working with other creatives, other photographers or videographers, directors, or just people who are passionate about something, and um, going from there. So I have some photographers who have been in the industry for a while in my following list, people who I'm following on Instagram. And I'd love to just sit down with them and photograph them. Um, like, since they've built this great thing for themselves that they're passionate about, I think it would just be really cool to capture them in a form that they've kind of used as well. So some names are Marina Williams, that person that I mentioned earlier, the self-portraits. Joe Greer, he's a photographer that does a lot of film photography, which is a whole nother thing to talk about. Annie Leibovitz is a big name in the industry. She's been doing photography for years, creates a lot of content for Vogue. It would just be cool to capture them in a way that they've captured so many other people. Um, yeah. I do want to say that photojournalism and documentary photography is a big field where you kind of just kind of follow someone along and photograph them in their element. And that's something that I think is cool, but I do prefer like the more portrait types of sessions, for now at least. So rather than necessarily photographing someone at work, maybe it would be a mix of photographing them, photographing other people, but then also sitting them down and being able to do a session with them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think when I asked that question, I thought it might be, some like celebrity or some famous person or something. And I so love, I mean, it really shows your dedication and commitment to your craft that you really just want to have a one-on-one session with, kind of a mentor out there in the world and mentoring you without even knowing who you are by just showing by their own example and modeling for you what it is to be at the top of your field. I think that's just so beautiful.
It's a great way to put it. Much more eloquent than I did.
I think you did a great job. So this has been so fabulous. I am so excited we had the chance to sit down and chat with each other. Do you have any last words that you would like to share with the audience before we go?
I would say don't let imposter syndrome get you down. It's easy when you're doing something creative to see all of this work from others and think, wow, like I'm never going to be that good, or this person's doing XYZ, and they're 18 and I'm 25 and like I haven't accomplished that. But everyone's on their own journey, and that's totally okay. There's so many things that I don't know how to do with photography, so many things that I want to do in the future, so many people I look up to, but just let that motivate you rather than bring you down, because everyone's on a different path. And at the end of the day, it's about creating something that you're happy with and that a process that you enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think I love that you said that. I think that's really true throughout life, no matter what you're doing. I mean, it's always easy to look at somebody else and say, "Oh, they're doing this better, and I'm not doing it well enough." Whatever, why bother putting all this effort into it? I think what's really interesting, and specifically because we're talking about photography and portrait photography, you talked a lot throughout this session about your vision and creating a vision for the shoot from the minute that you get that email saying that they're interested in hiring you. And I think the difference is, and why people should just follow their own thing and not give up on it, is because your vision is different than Annie Leibowitz's vision or Greer's vision or like your mother's vision for a photo or anything else. And, I think that if you lined all those people up and gave them the exact same subject, and you can tell me as a photographer, I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing that you would get different pictures.
Yeah, totally. Everyone has their own style, um, and hiring a photographer has to do with the style, but also the personality because it is that relationship that matters for sure.
Yeah. All right, Molly. Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I wish I could go on for hours.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe in a year or two, I'll have you back.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you so
All right.
much.
You are welcome.